I almost did the audiobook one. Welcome to 99% Geek Presents, a weekly geeky blog. I am your host and writer behind 99geek.ca, Andrew Geczy. As primarily a fiction writer, releasing chapters of my books in weekly chunks on my Patreon, like episodes of TV shows when I'm not trying to make ends meet in what feels like a poverty nightmare. I wanted my brand, 99% Geek, to offer more than just my writing, pulling from my many interests and passions. I don't have much to offer in the way of talent besides my writing, but I'm passionate about pop culture and try to keep myself as up to date on politics, science, and art as I can. Being a huge TV nerd, I run down the best shows of the week, go over all the major news headlines for people who have maybe gotten too tired to follow regular news, breaking it down and explaining it for people who might feel unable to follow along. And before anything else, I spotlight something cool and geeky for the week. Remember, you can follow along by going to patreon.com/99geek. This is Geekly Weekly number 97 for the week of Saturday, May 8th, and it is 4:03 p.m. I'm sorry I didn't get to this sooner. To be honest, I almost didn't do it. I was right on the verge of not doing it. I'm giving up. It's just not been a good day. I've got a huge headache. My back hurts. I don't know why. Stress. It's just there was this whole thing on Twitter where a bunch of people attacked me because they were convinced that I'm not a liberal and that I was pretending to be a liberal and that I was secretly a misogynistic pig, and so they were trying to convince me that I didn't believe the things I believed, and I'm just like, go away. But like, it wasn't just one person. It just they kept more people just ganging up, and it was like nonstop notifications all morning. I've been like, and I mean, I should just ignored them, but instead I just like kept responding to each one and then blocking them, and then it's another one would pop up and I respond to that one and block it, and another one would pop up, and I'm an idiot. I never should have engaged. It was my fault to begin with. The joke I made, I feel like I should at least say the joke. Uh, Seeing as, whoops, wrong thing. Seeing as I don't want to um hide, like if what I said was so wrong, I don't want to deny it. Um, so someone was talking about the I don't know if you have seen that, but recently pictures came out about Pamela Anderson. Not Pamela Anderson, Lily James as Pamela Anderson, and I believe it's Sebastian Stan as Tommy Lee, who I think I know him best from Rockstar in Excess, was it, or something like that. But um, she said that, like, okay, she said give whoever to Lily James and to Pamela Anderson all of the awards, and then I kind of put in quotes, I have done it, I have successfully turned an incredibly attractive actress into a much less attractive one, and then I put wins next year's Oscar, which I didn't mean that as in like I don't think it deserves to win next year's Oscar. I think it does. That looks insane and amazing, and that's an incredible job. I was just I don't know, I maybe it's insultive. I mean, okay, I'm not saying that Pamela Anderson isn't attractive in her own way. My comment was fueled by my personal dislike for, um, uh, plastic surgery and that kind of thing. But anyway, people just freaked out at me for being a misogynist, and an incel, and a piece of shit, and like just like I'm telling you, hundreds of notifications. Well, 100 notifications, maybe not hundreds, but 100. I'm sure it reached that point. And it was just like all morning, and it's just like, oh my god, I never should have said it. I don't want to take it away because that's not the kind of person I am. I don't think that hiding something like that makes me a better, like, oh, I don't know. I don't feel like it makes me a better person if I hide things that are potentially wrong. I would rather be judged for who I am and what I say honestly. But anyway, so that was hell, and I've been so stressed out about that. I almost didn't bother to record this podcast, but I will strive to do so. And thus, the highlight for this week is Mass Effect. I think I wanted to feature this as a highlight earlier when the trilogy pack was originally announced. But I decided to hold off because the best way for anyone new to enjoy this series is coming out this Friday. I don't know if you guys have heard about Mass Effect, the Legendary Edition. A lot of people consider Mass Effect one of the greatest games ever made, including me. People who have played it understand it, but people who haven't might be wondering what it does so different. It had the odd bugs, though nothing Bethesda heavy, and its gameplay was always a little stiff. But what it excelled at was narrative. It is very much a Witcher 3 style game with a branching narrative that gives you choices that affect how the story plays out. Only where Witcher is in a familiar medieval fantasy world, Mass Effect was one of the first of its brand of RPGs to go into space instead. Now, I don't think the writing or moral quandaries of Mass Effect are as nuanced or subtle as Witcher 3, but where I feel like Mass Effect excels is that instead of making you feel like you're living in a sci-fi universe, instead the game makes you feel like you're in a sci-fi movie, action movie. I apologize if I'm just going to be going through the numbers here. I don't have much in me today. The set pieces in action at least tries to rival stuff seen in the likes of Halo or Star Wars, but then it tempers it by giving you control of the narrative. Make the wrong choice and someone dies. Come across an AI uprising and be forced to choose a side. Side with the AI, and they'll be there later to back you up in the third game when you're in the final battle. But if you kill them all, you're going to be that much weaker when that final threat comes. All the saved games in the different games released many years apart all carried forward, so like every decision you made stuck. If you got your favorite character killed, they won't be back in the next game, and the story of that next game is going to play different for you because of it. One of my favorite examples of how it makes you feel like the action hero while it still keeps you involved comes when you first come across Saren, the evil specter you're hunting. He grabs you by the throat and starts monologuing. You can listen to his monologue, and he might even put you down, or things will play out some other way. But it also gives you the option at any point to push X and interrupt him by punching him in his ugly face. And the choice is yours. The agency and the type of action hero you want to be is up to you. The universe needs saving, and you're the only one who can make the right choices to do it. It also has a strong cast of characters. It's also one of the first RPGs to have almost all voice acting. I think KOTOR was the big leap before that, and I'm pretty sure Mass Effect is another leap from there. It came at the right time, and it is an absolutely epic adventure that everyone should check out at least once. The best part is, when we share stories, they aren't going to match completely, and isn't that half the fun? So yeah, if you've never played Mass Effect before, it's coming out this Friday, I believe, and that's never a better time to do it. It's because it's going to be the remaster. It's going to apparently keep everything that was great about the game and improve on little things here and there. And the graphics are going to be 4K HDR, beautiful and amazing. But it's also on Switch. If you want to get it on Switch, it's not going to be as 4K there. At least not until they come up with the Switch Pro, which is going to happen eventually. But anyway, moving on to the Geekly Weekly TV rankings. Let's see how fast we can get through all of this so I can move on with my life. People kept being in the thread, they kept being like, why are you blocking us? And it's like, because I want to have a life. Like, I'm sorry, I don't want to sit here and be yelled at, being called, I don't want to sit here and be called a conservative, incel, misogynist pig over and over again by 100 different people. Anyway, starting at the bottom. At number 13, with Black Lightning, it got 1.5 stars. I repeated multiple times throughout the episode that I hate it. I hate Lynn flirting with that other guy. I don't need that new effing unfit. I can't even swear right now. I'm so out of all of everything. This is the new side of me that I don't think you guys have seen before. That new effing unfaithful arc with 3 episodes left of the season. I hate the way Anissa treats her girlfriend / wife like all the time. She is so toxic, it's frustrating. I hated the way Tobias just scarred the living shit out of his loyal henchmen. Mentally, not physically. People aren't going to be loyal to you if you make them think you might kill them on a whim. I started out not hating Painkiller's continued crossover. I started to think, you know what? This is kind of how I would treat it. If I were crossing over shows or backdoor piloting a show, I would integrate it more like they're trying to do. Example would be Isabel Tsung in Urban Fantasy before getting her own book. But then they just follow the same old formula of him breaking into a facility, being all sneak, but whoops, it's time for the fighting now. He's activated his dark side and he beats people up. Anyway, tune in next week where he'll sneak into a different place, and then whoops, it's time for the fighting. He'll have to activate his dark side and beat some more people up. It's just, that's it. It's just the same thing every week. It's so frustrating. God, I have such little patience for that show at this point. Moving on from there to number 12 on the list, the Goldbergs with 3 stars. It was a funny episode, though it wasn't that funny. It was my favorite episode with Pop Pop, but I've never liked episodes with him too much. Erica's storyline running off to LA and hanging out with Lainey was fun too, but again, not that funny. I didn't fall into it didn't fall into too many overused formulas, but it was very predictable when Jeff showed up. I'm kind of sad he didn't make it to the concert, which was then veering away from the because I predicted, the predictable thing would have been that he would be there as he always is, and it would be an all moment, but that didn't happen. And so, I mean, in that sense, again, good job. I just want them to get back together though. So, what can I say? I'm a big Jeff and Erica shipper. Moving on from there to number 11 on the list, Kung Fu with 3 stars. I thought this episode was very heavy handed. I didn't think it was terrible, but I did feel like it was trying too hard to make a statement about BLM protests while at the same time not doing enough to actually make one. It both tried too hard and didn't do enough, and that is a rough combination. You're left with something that borders on cringeworthy, and while I feel like it only bordered on it, and other people seemed more moved by this episode than I was, I do feel like this episode wasn't great. I also saw people excited about the two gay guys kissing, but their chemistry this whole episode was so awful. And that scene was written so poorly. And I had so many other minor gripes, and I still hate the mom, but it wasn't terrible. And I did see one Republican freaking out that this is fantasy. BLM protesters being peaceful? Never. So at least the show was able to engage them, I guess. It's like he doesn't even realize that he's blatantly being the mom and just saying, that's not justice, that's vandalism. But whatever, what can you do? People never learn. Moving on from there, Supergirl with 3.5 stars. It wasn't a bad episode, though on some level it was coasting off the strength of the last episode. The time travel rules were incredibly inconsistent, and the episode dragged a bit. But otherwise, there was plenty of fun to be had, and a lot of what was fun about part 1 last week continued to be fun here. It was an enjoyable 2-episode romp into the past, and one of the better things that Supergirl has done so far this season. I feel like this episode had less flaws than the Flash episode above it, but it also hit less highs and didn't feel as impactful. More consistent than the Flash this week, but not necessarily better. Which brings us to number 9 on the list, The Flash with 3.5 stars. Again, also, they were very close together. It wasn't a bad episode of the show. In fact, I'd go so far as to say it was a pretty good one, despite a snooze of an A-plot. I kind of couldn't believe how many scenes in this episode were Danielle Panabaker just acting off herself. Just saying something really emotional with tears in her eyes, and then reacting to that really emotional thing she just said, with tears in her eyes. The melodrama of it all bordered on comedy. That's not to say I didn't find anything enjoyable in those court scenes. A few of the speeches were heartfelt, and the judge seemed reasonable right up until she gave the most unreasonable verdict. Any sane judge who acted like she did throughout the episode would have obviously been like, you are clearly reformed, and your powers have saved the city on multiple occasions. I'm clearing you of all charges. Clonk. Any other verdict is pure fantasy. And yet that's what happened. That said, the B story, while clunky at points, especially early on, actually had some powerful moments of Barry trying to appeal and relate to the woman they had taken an interest in. And he had a speech that brought me practically to tears. And the strength of that episode, and of him stopping another villain with just his words, made that ending all the more shocking and impactful. I look forward to the next episode. So yeah, even though the A plot kind of sucked, the B plot ended up being kind of elevated itself at the end and made the episode better. Moving on from there, number 8 on the list, The Bad Batch, with also 3.5 stars. It was a good first episode of the show. As someone who has become a bit of a videophile, the biggest kick I got out of the first episode was how amazing it looked in 4K HDR. I almost feel bad rating it as low as I am because this mini movie looked so damn good, but it was a little long in the tooth and felt like it dragged a little at points. The story was told rather clunkily, though they were able to fill in any plot holes I found, and the action wasn't super exciting, but it was consistent and easy to follow. I enjoyed the new girl, and I liked the tension built up with the sniper guy. You could tell he was close to snapping for much of the episode. All in all, it was a great return of the Clone Wars, and I liked the longer runtime, even though it wasn't necessarily as good as the best of Clone Wars, and it did seem to go a little long, almost like its biggest strengths were also its greatest weaknesses. The second episode aired a few days later. That one was fine as well, a little better than the first, if only because it didn't drag on as much. It did feel a little weaker in places, 2. Better episode, but not by much. So again, it was one of those cases like The Flash, where it's stronger in places, weaker in other places, but overall was a slightly better episode than the first one. But I just put them together in the ranking. Not that this show is bad, decent production, and amazing in visuals. Makes it above average. Moving on. Number 7 on the list, The Equalizer, with 4 stars. It was a fun, munchable episode of The Equalizer. I didn't feel it was particularly standout, besides the hilarious moment when she threw the detective in front of a bullet, and I feel him turning against her throughout the episode was tragic to watch, but should set up some interesting narratives ahead. The case of the week didn't bore me, the performances were strong. I can say a million times that shows like this aren't really my jam, but if you like procedurals like this seems like one of the better ones. I guess. I wouldn't really know. I do like when the DA talks about hunting the vigilante. I get Arrow flashbacks. Warm, squishy Arrow flashbacks. Moving on from there, number 6 on the list, Batwoman with 4 stars. This was a really good episode of the show, possibly even the best episode of the season. Alice was certainly the best she's been all season. There was a lot of fantastic action, including a fight between the old Batwoman and the new Batwoman, which was enough fight in itself. Which was enough of a fight in itself. But we actually had a lot of good Batwoman action moments outside of that scene as well. Also, Mary was great. Luke didn't have much to do, but was fine. I really enjoyed Sophie's arc this episode. I'm used to being frustrated at her choices, but her choice to keep her knowing of Batwoman's identity a secret feels in this case rather selfless, so I don't hate it. What I do hate is how this episode ended. I was ready to give this episode more than 4 stars. It was great. Now I want to give it 3.5 stars, but that might be too low. What Ryan does to Alice at the end of the episode was so cruel, so unforgivable. It mirrored Ruby Rose leaving her behind in Arkham Asylum in Season 1. Only in this case, Ryan left her at the hands of an assassin literally less than a minute after she had just risked her neck to save Ryan's life. That's right, she wouldn't have even been there except to save Ryan, and Ryan thanked her, literally said thanks, and then turned around and left her to die. I am shocked and shook. This woman is damaged, has abandonment issues, and every time she visibly tries to make an effort to be better, the good guys completely betray her and abandon her, and took joy in her suffering. How am I supposed to be sympathetic for these people? I try not to let character choices affect the grade I give, but in this case, the best I can do is temper my anger some. I won't give it a 3.5, but damn I am mad. Poor Alice. Moving on to number 5 on the list, Family Guy with 4.5 stars. Or, no, just 4 stars. I'm sorry. It didn't deserve that extra half. I didn't mean to get its hopes up. This was a really silly and fun episode. Not perfect, but with the usual weak plot, but great side jokes. And the plot wasn't that weak. It was just underserved to get to specific moments. The fact that it focused on Meg and was a decent episode is great. It's nice to see Meg get a plot that didn't feel forced or a drag or a change of pace. The side plot with Stewie was silly but worth a few laughs, especially when his rival got involved. As usual, all the best laughs, though, came from the random cutaways. I am thinking, though, that I do remember that last time when I think it was Lois that caught a full episode to herself, and it did kind of feel really off. And so I think I want to point out how awesome it is that they successfully wrote an episode specifically focusing on one of the female characters without making it shitty. Like, that is actually good job, Family Guy. Moving on from there to number 4 on the list, Legends of Tomorrow with 4 stars. This was a fun and silly, if unexceptional, episode of the show. This show has reached some zany highs, and while I feel like this episode didn't reach the zaniness of some, it was fun and made me laugh plenty of times. Also, I felt Sarah was a total badass this episode, and that helped a lot to elevate it. Ava's leadership of the team was pretty fun too, as was finding out that Gary was an alien. I think the fact this episode ended up feeling unexceptional is more reflective of how good the show can be than how bad this episode is. A strong 4 stars. Moving on from there to the top 3. Starting with The Nevers at 4.5 stars. I enjoyed this episode of The Nevers, even though it was largely the characters licking their wounds after the events of last episode. Characters like the Inspector, who I had previously been mixed on, had a really strong episode. I also enjoyed the process of the gang trying to figure out who got Mary killed. I enjoyed the investigation of sorts and even was shocked by the eventual reveal. Though I kind of lost track on how we got there, I even enjoyed the B-plot involving some of the side characters trying to figure out what crazy language Lady was saying. It gave characters who don't normally get attention something to do, and was a fun aside. A lot of the show's weaknesses weren't necessarily solved this episode, so much as kept in the background, or else not in the episode at all. It was overall an enjoyable character-driven hour. Moving on from the, and that's, I believe that's the highest rating that the Nevers has gotten yet. So good job for what must be the best episode. I don't think I said that, and it's cool because it was a kind of a quieter episode, and yet it was the best one. So that's fun. Having it focus more on the characters and who they are, I think helped. Moving on from there to number 2 on the list, Mayor of Easttown, right, with 4.5 stars. Right after I drink this water. Water break, do 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 do. Water break. All right, Mayor of Easttown. This episode was fantastic. Their performances and writing were both top notch. Some of the choices, mainly the big twist at the end, were incredibly frustrating, but also I felt that some of the interactions with Siobhan and the radio DJ were off and a little forced. Evan Peters was amazing, and Mare had some great moments too, but with every step forward, she also took 3 steps back. Planning evidence. She remains just so damn unlikable. I honestly wouldn't be upset if it's revealed at the end that she's the killer. I so thoroughly cannot stand her character. I mean, that's practically impossible, but I would be like, good. It'll be interesting to see where the show goes from here. I kind of hope there aren't many episodes left. Part of me just wants it to be the priest because that would be easy and a fun conclusion. I would have no complaints. And then the focus of the season would actually then be on Mare keeping her job or not. And it's a total curveball that, you think it's about the murder, but it ends up being about Mare instead. I don't know. That ending did seem like the sort of curveball you write as a writer and go, yeah, what a great game changer I just did. And then you sit down and write the next episode and realize, what the fuck corner did I just write myself into? Moving on from there, number 1 on the list, Fear the Walking Dead with 4.5 stars. So no show got 5 stars this week. The Nevers was first in the ranking for about 2 hours until I watched Fear the Walking Dead. I think I watched The Nevers first only because I needed to eat and I didn't want to necessarily eat, but watching Fear the Walking Dead and have something super gross happen. This episode was great, and that was a good call, by the way. I just remembered the compost zombies. This episode was great, amazing even. I enjoyed the infiltration of this new cult and exploring just how crazy all the people inside were. I appreciated the one black guy finally getting a lot of development, even getting a brother he got to find out was still alive, and then fix that particular oversight, all before the credits rolled. It's true. Alicia was great this episode as well, and honestly, there were multiple points I thought both she and the black guy were dead. This show did a great job of making us think anyone could die now, and I'm like holding my breath in fear. The Walking Dead. Every episode. Finally, I enjoyed seeing Lionel Luthor at the end. Some of the plotting along the way felt a little clumsy and clunky, but it was overall a great episode, ever so slightly shy of a full 5 stars. If only it wasn't so clumsy and clunky with its plotting. But anyway, moving on from the Geekly Weekly TV rankings to the Geekly predictions. That's new releases people will be talking about around the water cooler over the next week. Don't forget that you can always get my instant reactions to TV shows I watch and other things by following me at Andrew Geczy on Twitter. Just don't send me messages saying that I'm a misogynist because I will cry. Moving on to Geekly predictions, new releases people will be talking about around the... I already read that. Mass Effect Legendary Edition is number 1 on the list because I love it and we talked about it a lot, so I don't think I need to go on any further. But that comes out this Friday for both consoles and PC. I put links to a couple trailers. One trailer is for the Legendary Edition, and then another trailer is the 3 launch trailers for the games when they came out. So you can those kind of act like story trailers, sort of, or even movie trailers. So you can check those out. They are, of course, that would also help you compare. You can compare the trailers and see how the graphics are different and things like that. Moving on from there to number 2 on the list, Army of the Dead. That's coming out on Netflix on Friday. This is the Zack Snyder directed zombie movie with Dave Bautista. Bautista has certainly been raving about how great the movie will be, and it's supposed to be Snyder's passion project. Bautista literally gave up a role in James Gunn's Suicide Squad to do this movie, so it might be worth giving a chance. That's all I'm saying. I can't say if it's gonna be good or not, but it could be. We'll see. The Underground Railroad is 3rd on the list. It's coming out on Amazon Prime on Friday. I believe that was a show, not a movie. But it looks intense, powerful, and emotional. And I don't see what I don't want to say anything more about that and have people start calling me racist then too. But obviously I support and think that I might check it out. We'll see. Honestly, will probably depend on whether or not they drop one episode or the whole season. If they drop the whole season, I will probably not be checking it out anytime soon. But if they just drop it one episode at a time, I might just give it a chance. And it looks like the cinematography is pretty and stuff. So cool. Moving on from there, even though it also seemed like it was whatever. Anyway, moving on from there. Those Who Wish Me Dead, HBO Max, Friday. That's number 4 on the list. This trailer looked really good. It's with Angelina Jolie as a forest ranger and a lookout who has to protect a kid from killers. I had never heard of this movie, but I watched the trailer and I was like, wow, that was cool. Same with number 5 on the list, Hacks, which comes out on HBO Max on Thursday. So HBO Max is getting all kinds of cool stuff. I wasn't going to add it here either until I watched the trailer, and I thought this one looked funny. Not so much cool, but funny. And so it's here now. Live with it. Moving on, number 6 on the list, Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance comes out on consoles and PC today, or yesterday, I think, actually, technically, but they literally announced it after my last Geekly Weekly came out, so I couldn't do anything to announce it, to talk about it earlier. I actually honestly thought this was going to be number 1 on the list, and then all those other things took its place. I didn't even realize Mass Effect. I don't know. I'm crazy. But yeah, Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance is a game I used to remember. I used to remember, but then I forgot it. It was on the PS2, and it was, in fact, I believe, the first game I ever got on the PS2. When I bought a PS2, I didn't get one at launch because I was not old enough to do such a thing. But I remember my parents got it for me for my birthday, and the first game I got with it was Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance. And I remember playing it with my father. There was a fun co-op mode, couch co-op. I did hear on Twitter, someone messaged me randomly, like I would be able to help her, but saying that she was having an issue. She wasn't able to get the second player to connect. So I don't know what's going on there. Maybe there's some sort of bug going on with the game. I tried to walk her through some steps I could think of that mostly involved my memory of how frustrating it could be trying to do Xbox 360 games and backwards compatibility, and then like you have multiple profiles, but then you can't use the profile, and you got to use a guest account, you got to unsign and then sign back in and do all this other crazy stuff. So I was trying to be like, well, try some of this kind of stuff, and it didn't sound like it was helping, and I was like, well, I hope you figure it out, because I don't know what to do. I don't have the game, so sorry. But I enjoyed the game, and it's fun. It's very Diablo-esque. Watching the trailer, I was reminded that the camera angle bothers me a little bit, which is a weird thing to say, but just it feels a little too top down. I don't know why. It just feels, compared to Diablo, it is too top down. And then it makes everyone you're looking at kind of weird, because you're just looking at the tops of their heads all the time. But yeah, so but other than that, it's a fun Diablo-esque RPG, and depending on how much it costs, it might be worth the price. Moving on from there to the last thing on the list, Castlevania Season 4, Netflix comes out on Netflix on Thursday. I was laughing because I imagine if I had actually seen any of the other seasons, it probably would be much higher on the list. But I have not actually given Castlevania a chance yet. I've heard it's really good. So if you have watched it, you're probably excited to know that Season 4 is coming out this Thursday. Lucky you. It's on my list, but I mean, you know how many things are on my list, and it's not, I wouldn't say it's all that high. I honestly, at this point, I wouldn't even say it's in the top 100. Moving on from there to honorable mentions, things that don't make this list, like continuing shows of quality or nonfiction content. High School, the musical, the show, comes to Disney Plus on Friday. I've never watched it. I have seen the High School Musicals once. So, okay, whatever. But if that's your thing, I know it's fairly popular, so if that's your thing, enjoy. SNL airs tonight for the first time in a while, and the first host back is Elon Musk, so it's okay to skip if you want. That doesn't necessarily sound like a good time for me. I'm still unsure if I'm going to watch it. I'm recording it, but I'm not sure if I'm going to watch it. I'm probably, even though I keep saying that, I will probably watch it. I have been pretty faithful with SNL for a while now, and especially through some bumpy roads, including a Trump episode. So, I mean, shit happens. The final honorable mention, Star Wars: The Bad Batch continues to air. Moving on from that, and that comes out Friday as well. Moving on from there to Geekly News headlines. That's news from the past week you need to know, so you won't be as ignorant as a QAnon loser. Invincible creator has a rough story plan for seasons 5 to 7. I have started incorporating more entertainment news, and it's good. and hearing rumors like, oh, there could be 5 to 7 seasons, that's pretty awesome. I don't necessarily think it's worth um, focusing on. His quote is, "We have a rough roadmap of where different storylines fall and how the different seasons would begin and end, but it varies depending on how much we want to work in and how much we don't want to work in. I could see this going for somewhere between 5 to 7 seasons, depending. It's not something that's set in stone. It could go much longer than that. I hope so. And it could go much less than that. Who knows? But there's a potential there for us to do 100 seasons of the show. God, that'd be amazing." So what a great quote. And that comes from screenrant.com by Brittany Bailey, and it was published 7 days ago. They don't give me a specific date. And that's cool. What a cool story. And that's an exclusive they put because he just happened to say that. And it's like, oh, is that news? Cool. I'm excited for that. I keep telling you how amazing Invincible is. If you haven't watched it yet, you need to check it out. The season just finished last week, and it was either 1 or 2 on the list every single week. I think Falcon and the Winter Soldier beat it out like twice, but it beat out Falcon and the Winter Soldier most of the time because it was just that damn good. So check it out. Second on the list, I don't know why I'm counting them. They're ranked in order of awesome. Actually, they're ranked in order of when they came out. Like I read them in the order of date. Marvel's Fantastic Four reboot release won't arrive until late 2023 or beyond. And my response to that is, Jesus, I could be dead by then. This is a story by Polygon. Excuse me. Water. A story by Polygon.com by Matt Patches. I'm not dying, I swear. May 3rd, 2021. The studio continued to tease 4 in a batch of MCU release date updates. I actually don't think I checked this out, so let's hear what it says. After announcing the film in December 2020 at a Disney investors call, Marvel Studios has remained mostly mum about plans for its big screen reboot of Fantastic Four. That's disappointing. I think it could be done well. Of course, Marvel fans have not... And you know what? I didn't hate the one with Chris Evans. I think they were fun and silly and were somewhat true to the comic characters. You know, like they were pretty true to the comic characters. They just weren't necessarily great movies, if that makes sense. You know, like if you're coming in as a fan of the character, there's a lot in there to enjoy. Even though they aren't necessarily fulfilling for somebody who's just going in there looking for a good movie. That's my opinions of the old Fantastic Four movies. Rumors that Reed Richards would pop up in WandaVision ran so rampant during the Disney Plus show's run that director Matt Shakman later apologized to fans. I feel like he more needs to apologize for there not being Doctor Strange in there than Reed Richards, but that's funny. Now, in a batch of new Marvel release date updates, the studio has once again hyped its reimagining of comics' first family for hungry Marvel audiences. In an announcement video, Marvel teased that Fantastic Four would arrive after Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which hits on May 5th, 2023. That would leave the fall of 2023 wide open for the movie, or sometime in 2024. Like, oh my god. Fantastic Four will be directed by John Watts, who is the rare filmmaker to helm 3 movies in the MCU, Spider-Man Homecoming, Far From Home, and No Way Home. So just all the Spider-Man movies then. Keeping Watts in-house makes sense. Kevin Feige has had to share the skilled blockbuster director with Sony, thanks to the near-disastrous pact made to produce the Spidey trilogy. Now Watts will make films for Marvel Studios proper, and with several installments already under his belt, the experience could lend this version of the film what it needs to take root in the zeitgeist. Fox's first attempt at bringing the superhero family to the big screen fizzled out after the sequel, 4, Rise of the Silver Surfer, which I think was a better movie than the first technically, but it's not saying much. Slightly more infamously, Fox and director Josh Trank butted heads over the direction of the studio's 2015 Fantastic Four reboot, resulting in one of the most derided superhero movies of the last decade. Interesting. So cool. Moving on from there. Conservatives won't rest until everyone stops teaching kids critical race theory. This is a story on Vice.com by Paul Bless. We are that's absolutely correct. We are 100%. What is it? Is it rubbernecking? No, but like whiplashing. We're absolutely whiplashing from entertainment directly into GOP bullshit. Let's go. This is a story by Paul Bless on May 3rd, 2021. Conservatives are furious that American schools might actively start to teach that systemic racism is a real problem in the US, and so far they're winning the war to stop that from happening. Over the past few weeks and months, suburban school districts, and multiple suburban school districts, I think is what they're trying to say, and Republican state legislatures, and even former President Trump himself have railed against critical race theory, a framework that treats race as a construct that's been used to exploit people and acknowledges the racism inherent in major US institutions. The only problem is that critical race theory has now been co-opted by the right as a stand-in for any attempt to reform schools to provide a more inclusive education for children. On Saturday, voters in the Carroll Independent School District, ISD, in Texas, a district of 8,500 students in the wealthy community of South Lake outside of Dallas, overwhelmingly elected 2 new people to the school board who publicly vowed to reject a cultural competence action plan. After several racist incidents in recent years, including multiple videos showing students in the majority white district saying and chanting the N-word, a district diversity council of dozens of parents, teachers, and staff came up with a 34-page plan that included hiring a director of equity and inclusion, embedding education about diversity and inclusion into the curriculum, cultural competency training for teachers, and creating a process for students to report discrimination. This was met with backlash from conservatives, who painted it as an insidious attempt to implant cultural Marxism into America's impressionable young minds. On Saturday, 2 school board candidates who ran in opposition to the plan each won their races with nearly 70% of the vote. One of the newly elected school board candidates, Hannah Smith, is a lawyer and former clerk for Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito, 2 of the most right-wing justices on the Supreme Court. The voters have come together in record-breaking numbers to restore unity, Smith told NBC News in a statement. By a landslide vote, they don't want racially divisive, critical race theory taught to their children or forced on their teachers. Voters agreed with my positive vision of our community and its future. Critical race theory ain't coming here, the South Lake Families PAC, a conservative group opposing the plan, wrote on Twitter Saturday. This is what happens when good people stand up and say, not in my town, not on my watch. That was another thing. People kept being like, he thinks he's a good person. Anyway, I was flashing back to that Twitter bullshit. While schools and districts across the country have begun reforming their curricula in recent years in response to police killings and the larger cultural conversation about racism, there's zero evidence that critical race theory is taking over American schools and indoctrinating kids, but the reactionary right has nonetheless put a spotlight on the effort to reform schools to be more inclusive, and the schools in South Lake are far from alone. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis announced in March that his state's proposed civics curriculum would expressly exclude unsanctioned narratives like critical race theory and other unsubstantiated theories. And last week, Idaho became the first state to pass a law banning the teaching of critical race theory. The Idaho law claims that ideas inherent in critical race theory exacerbate and inflame divisions in ways contrary to the unity of the nation and the well-being of the state of Idaho and its citizens. The ban came even though there's little reason to believe critical race theory is even being taught. In my 32 years in different school districts, this is a woman, a public charter school, I never saw any of this happening, and I still don't see that happening, Republican Representative Julie Yamamoto told NPR. Yamamoto voted to ban teaching of critical race theory. To ban the teaching of critical race theory because of, I guess, what she's saying. In my 32 years in 2 different school districts, and a public charter school, I never saw any of this happening, and I still don't see that happening. In Louisiana, an effort to ban not only critical race theory, but also divisive concepts such as institutional racism or sexism, yes, that's a divisive concept, fell apart last week after the state representative who authored the bill said during a committee hearing that schools should teach the good, the bad, and the ugly of slavery. The legislator, Ray Garofalo, later had to clarify that he did not actually think that there was anything good about slavery. Thank God. I don't believe it, but... One of the former President Donald Trump's final acts in office was releasing the 1776 report, a response to the New York Times 1619 project, which sought to minimize the role early U.S. leaders played in the atrocities of slavery and genocide as part of an effort to maintain America's religious devotion to the Founding Fathers. Upon taking office, one of President Joe Biden's first acts was to shutter the commission that authored that report. Doing bad history is a really good way to continue to divide people, tell lies about what is true American history, and discredit the power and impact and pain associated with the institution of slavery. Dr. Lionel Kimball, a vice president of the Association of the Study of African American Life and History and an associate professor at Chicago State University, told Vice News in January. I agree with that. Pretty much what that's saying is that education is important because otherwise these institutionalized things such as racism and sexism will forever continue. It's education where we can make the best and fastest and most effective change. And also, I wanted to point out the fact that, did you notice the guy saying how, oh, we have all come in big numbers to vote, and everyone's voting for not having critical race theory, and see, we're proving it with the vote. First off, my reaction to that is, I think they have a problem with critical race theory being taught. I mean, of course they have a problem with critical race theory being taught. It will also teach people to think critically, and then they'll all choose not to vote conservative. Cons will block the liberal agenda at every level. Liberals must vote for every little thing. The price of freedom is eternal vigilance. That's what I'm trying to say, is that you cannot just be like, we did it, we voted Joe Biden in, we're done, we're good, moving on, because Republicans are fighting at every level to stop it. Like, to stop the blue wave. They're like, oh, we can't win on this level, then we will try to win on this level or this level or this level. You have to be vigilant. You have to show up every time because they will not quit. They will not stop. And the war never ends. My Xbox just freaked out. Xbox, go to TV. The war will never end. I'm sorry if you thought it would. Moving on from there, the state that executed a black child wants to bring back the firing squad. That's a disturbing thought, but what was even more disturbing to me was the story that they're talking about. So let's move on to that. Even though it is a story from a long time ago, 1944, so don't start making up your posters and marching in the street now. But this is a story by Samir Ferdowsi, Vice.com, May 6, 2021. Oh, man, my back. South Carolina, the state that carried out the execution of a black 14-year-old boy in 1944, now wants to bring back the firing squad. The House voted 66-43 on Wednesday in favor of adding the option for death by firing squad to condemned inmates. The bill passed the state Senate in March, and the governor has said he's eager to sign it. Currently, prisoners on death row in South Carolina can choose to die by either lethal injection or electric chair, and that chair has a shameful history. In 1944, South Carolina wrongfully executed George Junius Steiny. Sorry, hiccup. In 1944, South Carolina wrongfully executed George Junius Steiny Jr., a young black teenager, for allegedly killing 2 white girls, a crime he was proven innocent of 70 years later. And how they even did it is horrifying. Steiny's execution, I'm sorry if this triggers anyone, was brought up during deliberations Wednesday by opponents of the death penalty who discussed the horrors of Steiny's execution. The boy's body was so small that his executioners weren't able to properly tighten straps to his legs before electrocuting him. He had to sit on a stack of books to reach the chair's headpiece, according to reports at the time. How horrible is this? What keeps going through my head, I don't even think they mentioned it there, is what the fuck was the mom thinking at this time? Like, can you imagine being his mother? Oh my fucking god. Like, that would be the most traumatized... Or father. I'm sorry, I don't want to be misogynistic. But that would be literally the most horrifying. I cannot believe that they did that to a 14-year-old kid, even in 1944. Don't forget, World War II was going on, and we were like, where are the good guys? Now let's murder this 14-year-old black kid. Horrifying. Not only did South Carolina give the electric chair to the youngest person ever in America, but the boy was an innocent, said State Representative. And isn't this the funnest story ever? He didn't do it. He was proven innocent later, apparently 70 years later. I think that was like at the top, wasn't it? No, where did it say that? Because that is also. Oh, no, that was. I had, in fact, already read that. But what the fuck? He was proven innocent! Like, this happened. We haven't heard about. Have you heard about this? I haven't heard about this. That's fucked up. That is like, I don't even care about the rest of the story. Have whatever your opinions you want about the death penalty, but that is fucked up. And there should be no differing opinions about that. Moving on from there. Despite business warnings, GOP moves ahead with voting bills. This is a story all about how my life got turned upside down. I'd like to take a moment and sit right there. Oh, great. It's doing the thing again where it doesn't want to pull up the article, which is so très bizarre. I wonder if it's a... Huh. It could be like a stream thing. Maybe they're like, we don't want people putting our articles on their streams. At which point, I might be able to just pull it up somewhere else. And then just read it to you, even though it's going to be a white screen for the video watchers. Bop. Also, as I'm doing this, I saw in the corner that I have 5 new notifications, and I'm sure at least a couple of them will be hating on me. Moving on. So this is, indeed, this works just fine here. It just doesn't work when I'm on the stream, I guess, which is fun. Good choice, I guess. Despite business warnings, GOP moves ahead with voting bills. This is a story by Acacia Coronado and Bill Barrow of the Associated Press, posted May 4th, 2021 at 3:51 p.m. And it comes out of Austin, Texas. Republican lawmakers around the country are pressing ahead with efforts to tighten voting laws, despite growing warnings from business leaders that the measures could harm democracy and the economic climate. More than 50 Texas companies and business organizations on Tuesday released an open letter expressing opposition to any changes that would make it harder to vote in that state. The letter, signed by American Airlines, Microsoft Corp, HP Inc., Patagonia, Levi Strauss & Co., and others, comes ahead of votes on legislation that critics say would place disproportionate burdens on minority and disabled voters. We believe the right to vote is sacred. When more people participate in our democratic process, we will all prosper, the letter said. The growth of free enterprise is directly related to the freedom of its citizens. The statement stopped short of stating opposition to the specific legislation proposed in Texas. Nonetheless, it amounts to a cautious rebuke of lawmakers using former President Donald Trump's false claims about a stolen election to make it harder to vote. Texas is emerging as the next major battleground in the fight over voting laws. The Texas House could vote as soon as this week on a bill that effectively targets Harris County, home of Houston, and a Democratic hub, after officials there dramatically expanded voting options in 2020 amid the coronavirus pandemic. The Texas Senate has advanced its own package, with the 2 chambers likely headed to a compromise committee that would fashion a final version. Republican Governor Greg Abbott has expressed broad support for the effort. Texas would follow other GOP-led states, including Georgia, Iowa, and Florida, where GOP Governor Ron DeSantis is expected to sign voting legislation passed last week. On Monday, Kansas Republican-led legislature overrode the Democratic governor's veto to approve a voting law. Arizona is also considering legislation, and Republicans in Ohio are expected to introduce a package of proposals this week. The details of the bills vary state to state, but follow a similar pattern of making it harder for people to vote by mail or absentee, while voters of both parties have long used those methods to cast ballots. Democrats were more likely to vote remotely in 2020, a fact that has spurred the GOP crackdown. In Texas, one measure would eliminate drive-through voting, which more than 127,000 people around Houston used during early voting last year. Some Democrats estimate that more than half of those voters were Black, Latino, or Asian American. Republicans also want to grant partisan poll watchers wider latitude and make it a felony for an elections officer to spend mail voting applications to households that didn't request them, as Harris County tried to do during the pandemic. Democrats have been pushing businesses to use their clout to influence the debate, although businesses have been divided over diving into the partisan battle. Statements issued by companies have done little so far to derail voting-related proposals and have opened up rifts between Republicans and their one-time corporate allies. The Texas businesses, calling themselves Fair Elections Texas, used notably careful language in their statement, declaring that elections should be convenient, transparent, and secure. a nod to Republicans' insistence that their agenda is about preventing fraud and shoring up voter confidence in election results. At the same time, the group called on all elected leaders to make democracy more accessible and said they oppose any changes that would restrict eligible voter access to the ballot. Georgia became a national flashpoint over election procedures when it became the first state to adopt an overhaul. Among the key provisions, the state now will require voter identification to apply for and then cast absentee ballots, replacing a signature match program. Georgia officials also effectively limited ballot drop boxes in metro area counties when compared to the 2020 numbers. After the bill was signed, Georgia-based Delta Airlines and the Coca-Cola Company criticized the bill, angering Republicans. Governor Brian Kemp, a Republican who faces re-election in 2022, has loudly blasted corporate America for yielding to cancel culture. Because that's whatever. Corporate lobbying has been more muted in Arizona, where Republicans are pushing a slate of election bills. It remains to be seen whether their narrow state House majority will be enough to adopt significant changes. Trump prevailed over Democratic Joe Biden in Texas and Florida, but Democrats have continued to narrow the partisan gap in Texas in recent cycles, and Florida remains a battleground, spurring Republicans in both states to pursue new restrictions. DeSantis, a Trump ally, is expected to sign a measure that would tighten voter ID requirements for absentee ballots. The business lobby in Florida, heavily influenced by the tourism industry, remained mostly mum, and some Republicans in the state noted that making it harder to cast absentee ballots could backfire, since the practice is so well established among older Floridians across the political spectrum. The GOP effort even extends to states where Trump won by uncontested margins. In Canada, Republicans this week overrode the veto of Governor Laura Kelly, a Democrat, on a bill that would make it harder for individuals and groups to collect absentee ballots and deliver them for voters. It will now be a misdemeanor for someone to collect and return more than 10 ballots in Kansas, which Trump won by 15%. In Ohio, where Trump won twice by nearly double digits, Republicans are set to unveil a package that will eliminate a day of early voting, increase voter ID requirements, and prohibit placement of ballot drop boxes anywhere but a local elections office. But Ohio Republicans argue that they're also including other provisions that bipartisan elections board and voting rights groups have advocated. So that's bad, because they're trying to silence you and silence everyone that doesn't agree with them. You might think we're seeing a new liberal age, and yet in the shadows, conservatives continue to mobilize and do anything they can to undermine democracy, and it's working, and no one is stopping them. So, don't be a passive observer. Be active. Call shit out. The GOP wants to kill COVID unemployment pay to force you into low-wage jobs. This is the last story of the night, so let's get into that. This is a story on Vice.com by Paul Blest on March 7th, 2021. Big business and the Republican Party have decided more than a year into a global pandemic that life is simply too good for unemployed people right now. 2 Republican governors said earlier this week that they would end their state's participation in all federal pandemic unemployment assistance, including the program that adds $200 per week to unemployment checks and another meant for gig workers and others who aren't eligible for state unemployment. So just before I move on, so we're clear here. The U.S. was giving their people free money, and Texas, I believe it was Texas, wasn't it Texas? 2 Republican governors, who knows where they were from, said, hey, we don't want that for our people. we want our people to suffer because we don't think they're going to get jobs. And on Friday, after the federal April jobs report showed fewer jobs created than previously expected, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce called on Congress to kill the extra $200 benefit altogether, claiming that a quarter of people receiving unemployment are making more than they did in the workforce. The problem there, of course, being that they should be raising minimum wage, but they don't want to do that. One reason why people might be making, I should have just read it, might be making more money on unemployment adjusted for inflation. Wages have largely remained stagnant for decades. The Chamber of Commerce, however, opposes a $15 minimum wage and historically rejected minimum wage increases, including the 2009 hike to the present-day $7.25. That only happened in 2009. That's insane. Friday's jobs report from the Bureau of Labor Statistics found that 266,000 new jobs were created in April, but the unemployment rate remained virtually unchanged at 6.1%. Prior estimates expected a million new jobs last month and the unemployment rate to drop to 5.8%. Those big expectations were due to dropping coronavirus cases and the continued success of the inoculation campaign. 57% of American adults have received at least one shot and 42% have been fully vaccinated. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce, did I skip something? Nah, who cares? The U.S. Chamber of Commerce is pinning the blame for the poor job numbers on the American Rescue Plan passed by Congress earlier this year, which, among other things, gave American adults $1,400 stimulus checks and added a $300 per week benefit to unemployed workers on top of what they already get from their states. The disappointing jobs report makes it clear that paying people not to work is dampening what should be a stronger jobs market, Neil Bradley, the Chamber of Commerce's chief policy officer and executive vice president, said in a statement. The most powerful trade group in the country then called on Congress to abruptly end the PUA, which is currently scheduled to expire September 6th. One step policymakers should take now is ending the $300 weekly supplemental employment benefit, Bradley said. Based on the Chamber's analysis, the $300 benefit results in approximately 1 in 4 recipients taking home more in unemployment than they have earned working. Which, again, I love how these people talk as if that's a problem with the unemployment wage and not a problem with how much people are getting paid. There are other reasons why people might not be ready to re-enter the workforce. While the number of COVID-19 cases has severely decreased, the country continues to tally tens of thousands of positive tests per day, and nearly 40,000 people are currently hospitalized, and childcare remains a major issue. Education Secretary Miguel Cardona said Thursday that just over half of schools were open on a full-time basis at the end of March. If we want moms and dads to go back to work as this pandemic subsides, we need to provide them with the childcare they need, Senator Elizabeth Warren, a Democrat and former presidential candidate, said in a Friday statement responding to the jobs report. But in recent days, the governors of South Carolina and Montana have taken it upon themselves to cut off federal pandemic assistance to their own workers. On Thursday, South Carolina Governor Henry McMaster sent a letter to the state's Department of Employment and Workforce directing the agency to end South Carolina's participation in all pandemic unemployment programs at the end of June. These federal entitlements pose a clear and present danger to the health of our state's businesses and to our economy, McMaster wrote in the letter. Since the Biden administration and Congress appear to have little to no comprehension of the damage being done and no appetite to terminate the federal payments, the state of South Carolina must take action. McMaster's move follows a similar one by Montana Governor Greg Gianforte, who announced earlier this week that the state would cut off access to the federal benefits on June 27th while providing a return-to-work bonus of $1,200 for people currently unemployed who accept a job and then complete at least 4 weeks of work. Montana is open for business again, but I hear from too many employers throughout our state who can't find workers, Gianforte said. Biden's Labor Secretary Marty Walsh's office announced Gianforte's decision earlier this week and told the AP that there was no evidence that enhanced benefits were keeping people out of work. Choosing to eliminate these critical benefits will have the greatest impact on the most vulnerable, Labor Department spokesperson Michael Trudeau told the AP. While big businesses and its allies bemoan their trouble in finding cheap labor, fewer Americans are going hungry at any other time during the pandemic. The nonprofit Feeding America reported in March that as many as 45 million Americans may have experienced food insecurity in 2020. But in April, the first full month after the American Rescue Plan passed, that's Biden's American Rescue Plan, the hunger rate amongst Americans plunged to 8%, Politico reported. That's the lowest rate since before the pandemic, according to Politico. Agricultural Secretary Tom Vilsack credited the success of the relief package. This type of support does make a difference, Vilsack told Politico. This is a pretty dramatic decrease. So there you go. Moving on from there. Remember, you can get instant reactions to the news articles that don't make the cut at Andrew Geczy on Twitter. That's AndrewGeczy. As far as my Geekly blog, sorry there's no writing last week. I'll be honest, I hit a brick wall with my writing because I thought I'd quickly read through everything I'd written first before starting the new Active Adrift Homeless. With 400 pages of the book, days went by, and I still wasn't done. The weekend came, still not done. I forgot that reading actually can take a long time, and my entire life became just about finishing the fucking thing. And I finally swear, and it was really frustrating as my whole life fell apart around me as I was trying to force my way through a book where I already knew everything that would happen. I hope reading my writing doesn't feel that way for others, because God did it feel like a chore for me. Though I thought the last couple chapters were better than I remembered them when I began. I don't know. I think I just cannot judge. I'm too close. But anyway, so even after the weekend was done, I was still working on it. I finally finished week 1, and I'm going to write week 2 tomorrow so that I stay ahead when I release week 1 on Monday. No more issues like that. I've learned my lesson. No more going back and reading everything. I've just written too much and gone too far. I'm still trying to rebuild my life from all that. I just caught up on all the TV I missed yesterday, and next week I have a bunch of chores to accomplish, and maybe an apartment-wide cleaning. We'll see. But for now, I'll leave you with all that. Comments? No comments on anything this week. Numbers were low, but I didn't release any writing, so that's not a surprise. My name is Andrew Geczy, and my brand is 99% Geek, found at 99geek.ca. I'm a writer writing monthly chapters of novels like episodes of TV shows, releasing them in 4 weekly segments, a teaser and 3 acts on Mondays at noonish on my Patreon page. Every month it's a different book over a range of genres, and they sometimes even cross over and connect. At the end of the month, the finished chapter is added to the PDF attached to the bottom of every post. Finally, the finished books are self-published on Amazon. There's a dark fantasy story about a post-apocalyptic world where powerful royals rule and enslave the remaining people struggling to survive on the last remaining landmass. There's also a sci-fi story about a people on a dying world who've built a ship to a new one, but their project is almost brought down by a terrorist organization within their own ranks. Finally, there's a crossover story where characters from my other books are brought into the distant future, where the princess of a far advanced civilization, one that lives in a solar system-sized megastructure around a Dyson Sphere, needs help defeating her twisted, power-hungry brother. And all these stories will be outside the paywall. For all to enjoy, as new episodes released weekly, and the finished chapters will be attached to the bottom of every post on the site in convenient PDF format, readable on computers, tablets, ebook readers, and phones at the end of the month. But that's not all my stories. There's also urban fantasy tales about a teenage girl turned into a vampire against her will, or a scorned lover investigating paranormal phenomena, or a journalist covering news and politics in the Middle East. And there's a fantasy story about a fallen angel trying to stop the end of the world. All these stories are published and available on Amazon and are also safe and sound behind the paywall in PDF format attached to an archive at the top of my Patreon page. Only viewable by subscribers, my entire library of work, thousands of pages worth, is easily accessible to every subscriber at any level. There's even a Geekly Weekly blog, which covers all the news you may have missed over the week, as well as ranks a week's worth of television and makes predictions on what new pop culture things might be in the public consciousness for the next week. It releases every Saturday at noonish. Finally, I do video game streams, both multiplayer matchmaking as well as single-player campaign playthroughs. You can see me play games like Final Fantasy, Call of Duty, Hitman, and more. Watch them as they happen at twitch.tv/wingcommander4, or wait till I release the recorded videos on days when I have nothing else to release. And you can see it all in one place. So stay tuned and maybe subscribe. It's only $1, and the support you show will go a very long way, I promise. There are also higher tiers. Give $5 one month, and you can name a character or a location or suggest a thing you might want to see. Basically, you get to give a noun, and then I promise to incorporate that noun into one of my stories somehow. Maybe not the same month you give a suggestion, but within 3 months guaranteed. No matter how crazy, you can't sabotage me, I promise. Think of it like a fun improv game, and you can keep giving nouns for every month you pay at the $5 tier, or if you give $10, you don't get 2 nouns, but you can give a description to go with your noun. Describe the personality of your character, or the look of your location, or the importance of your item. For $10, you get a noun and a description. You can also give $1 towards supporting my efforts at video game streaming or my weekly blog if that's more where your interests lie. I'm as poor as it gets, living paycheck to paycheck and sometimes starving, so I understand if you are too. I don't want to take food out of your mouth, so your attention is enough. Say something, comment here at the very least, follow me on Twitter at Andrew Geczy, that's Andy, REWGECZY, or Instagram at wingcommander4, that's WINGCOMMANDERIV, that's Roman numeral 4. Remember to leave a review if you read one of my books. Any reviews on Amazon/Goodreads or subscriptions here or comments on social media will just encourage more people to check out my work and allow me to grow. I can't do it without your efforts. That's 3 different ways you can help. Write reviews on any site that lets you subscribe here for as low as $1, or at the very least use your voice. Let me in the world know what you let me in the world know that you like what you read here. And you know what? If you didn't like what you read here, tell me anyway. If you think I'm a misogynist, tell me. I won't block you because at least you listen to my podcast. So I feel like you have earned the right to tell me so. Live long and prosper. May the force be with you. Long live Marceline the Vampire Queen. Remember that Kong bows to no one, but Godzilla is king of all monsters. We are the 99% Geek.